Welcome back to So Arizona Garden Friends. Let's talk about carrots today. I am going to try to up my carrot game this year. I was a little late getting my carrots in last year, and I did end up getting a pretty good harvest even still, but I am bound and determined to get an excellent harvest this year. I've got two long beds, you can see them behind me, and I've already planted a row of onions, and then about 12 inches from that I've planted some carrot seeds, an entire row of carrot seeds. My plan is to succession plant carrot seeds every 2 weeks, that way I can have a steady harvest and not have them come in all at once, which is what happened last year. And that was totally fine because they store for a really long time, but it's just a little bit hard on the gardener because you have to wash them and trim them and pack them and store them all at once. And so I'm trying to avoid that and make it a little bit easier on myself this year. Here are my onion starts all the way along, almost this entire 32-foot row. However, I had to stop down here because those are my pumpkins still in waiting. But then about 12 inches off, I planted my carrot seeds, an entire row all the way down just alongside those onions. When I was doing research for this video, I learned that the average American eats 10.6 pounds of carrots per person per year, which I thought was kind of a low estimate. Maybe I'm above average on my carrot consumption. I think I'm just gonna go with that, but a lot of recipes will call for the trifecta of carrots and celery and onion, especially if you're doing a lot of Italian food. So I really thought that that was kind of a low estimate, unless y'all aren't eating Italian food. I don't know. Speaking of Italian food, my kale is doing so well. I've got a bunch of different varieties in this little bed. I think 3 or 4 different varieties. I have this really yummy white bean and kale soup that I really like to make when I have fresh kale. So I think I know what I'm having for dinner. Carrots belong to the Apiaceae family of plants, and this is a really large family. There are 300 members in this group. These plant members are often called umbellifers, and that's because they have a wide, flat bloom that resembles an umbrella. When I plant members of this family in my garden, like cilantro, dill, fennel, parsley, and so many more, I will let some of those plants go to flower because they're so important for the pollinators and for the beneficial insects. And they're also really pretty. So if you like Queen Anne's lace, then that's what they look like. I had some carrots that I let go to flower, and I actually saved the seeds for them too. These blooms attracted so many things. I saw assassin bugs on them, which is a really important general predator for insects in your garden. I saw ladybugs. I saw all kinds of different native bees, lots of little tiny wasps, and so many important insects. And so I was really happy to just let them bloom and flower. And then I got seeds from them that I am going to plant this year. So it was a win-win. It added beauty, it attracted beneficial insects, and it gave me seeds. So I can't argue with any of those things. Botanists think that carrots originated in Afghanistan, but they did not look like the carrots we think of today. They were probably purple instead of orange because of the presence of a pigment called anthocyanin, and that pigment is in quite a few vegetables, and it makes those vegetables purple, like purple cabbage, for example. These carrots were also much woodier and multi-branched instead of having a single cylindrical root. I'll go over more carrot history at the end of the video, so if you want to stick around for that, just stay tuned. I don't know if you all can see this. It's a little praying mantis. I left some seed packets out and he is just hanging out right there. Right there. I haven't seen one for a while. So cute. I am kind of excited about seeing that little praying mantis because I haven't seen one for probably a month. When the garden was in full swing this summer, there were a ton of zinnias in the garden, and they would hang underneath those zinnia blooms, wait for the butterflies to land on the zinnia, and then they would just jump up and they would grab the butterfly and then they would eat it. I've got some video of that, so if I can find it, I will put that in the video. But it was a really cool thing to see, and when I was cleaning out the garden for the fall, I was finding butterfly wings all over the place, which was kind of sad, but also kind of cool to know that there was such an amazing amount of life in the garden this summer. This guy is a little late to the party. I'm not sure if he's gonna make it for too much longer because I haven't seen any butterflies for probably a couple of weeks out here in the garden. I'm gonna try to focus on carrots and stop being distracted by all the things that I'm seeing. So, carrots. If you want to grow carrots in your garden, you need to choose a spot that has full sun, that has fertile soil, and you want that soil to be very loose. And that's because as the carrot root grows, it doesn't want to find obstructions like rocks or compacted soil. I've harvested carrots in the past when I've had much poorer soil than I do now, and the carrots would come out and they'd be multi-branched and they'd be gnarly and weird shapes, and that's because the root was trying to find its way through that compacted soil and around rocks that it would find. I have worked really hard on my garden soil to make sure that it's fertile but also nice and loose and fluffy. That's because I don't want it to obstruct roots like carrots and turnips and beets and things like that I'm growing. I practice the no-till method, and that means that I do not till these beds once they've been established. Now, I do have a tiller that I used in the beginning to make the garden beds because my ground was so hard and compacted, so I tilled the ground, removed half the native soil, and then mixed back in compost to try to infuse some nutrients into that soil as well as lighten it up because there was so little organic matter and it was so compacted. I don't walk on my soil, so I've made these beds and they're 3 to 4 feet wide, and that is just enough room to be able to reach towards the middle from one side or the other, so I can access these beds without having to walk on them. Now, if you do have to walk on beds, try to put down a board or something like that, and definitely don't step on your soil when it's wet because that is really going to compact the particles and damage it. I don't till my soil because I don't want to damage the fungal networks or the soil biology that's present in the soil that is so important for the health of plants. When I put a shovel down into these garden beds, it goes right in and there is no resistance. And so this is a really good garden bed to plant carrots and root vegetables in because they are not going to have to struggle against rocks and compacted soil. Carrots will appreciate fertile, well-draining soil, so to prep my beds, I will add a couple of inches of organic compost. This is what I do with all of my beds just to ensure that there is good nutrient availability to any plant that I sow in those beds. And if I've grown anything hungry in the beds the season before, like corn or tomatoes, then I definitely want to replenish the nutrients that are in that bed before I go sowing something else later in the season. If you have poor soil or you're just a little bit worried about the nutrient availability in that bed, you can add an organic fertilizer to the top of those beds. I would go with a balanced fertilizer. So when you look at the 3 numbers on the front of the bag, those are going to be nearly equal. You'll see 3 numbers which stand for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and those numbers are going to be pretty equal across the board. So similar numbers, that's what you're looking for a balanced fertilizer. I would water that in well and let everything sit and get absorbed for about 3 weeks before you sow anything in those beds. Carrot plants grow best in temperatures that are no more than 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and seeds germinate best when the temperatures are 80 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. If you're in southern Arizona, you'll want to wait until the temperatures cool off in the fall. It was so hot for so late in the fall this year that I was wondering if I was ever going to be able to plant my cool season vegetables. But I think that it's plenty cool enough now. Today is supposed to be 75 for a high, and looking out at the forecast over the next couple of weeks, it looks like it's going to be no more than 80 degrees or so. So I am going to go for it. Like I said, I did plant carrot seeds last weekend, and so in 2 weeks' time, I'm sure it'll be cool enough that I can plant my next row of carrots without having to worry about it. If you're worried about waiting too late in the season, rest assured, carrots are pretty frost tolerant. I think they are frost tolerant to about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. In my yard, the coolest that I got last year was 18, and that was just for a couple of nights. I'm a little bit south of Tucson, but if you're in Tucson or in Phoenix or somewhere a little more north than I am, then you probably won't have to worry about temperatures getting below 20 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm doing some experiments on different kinds of carrots that do well in small spaces because I know so many of you are growing in raised beds or containers or in just a really small space. And so there are a ton of carrot varieties that you can use for small spaces that have much shorter roots, and I will talk about some of those in just a minute. But I've got an experimental 4x4 garden bed right here that I've got covered up because of the birds. Those birds will not leave the sprouts alone, as I've mentioned before. So I have to cover them with a row cover until the plants get big enough that the birds move on and try to find something else to pick at. But in this bed, I've made kind of a salad garden of sorts, which I'm going to talk about in a later video. One of the things that I've included in that bed is a couple of different varieties of very short carrots. There is a variety that I will talk about in a minute called a Parisian carrot, and it's like a tiny little nub, like just like a little ball, and it is so adorable, but it does really well in small spaces and even in shallow spaces because it is so short. I think it's probably about 3 inches, so as long as you have I would say at least double or triple that, any flower pot would accommodate it. The other variety of carrot that I'm growing in this bed is called a little finger carrot, and that is probably about 3 to 4 inches long, so it's a really small variety too. So I've got all of those planted in that little covered bed right there, and then I'll show you the other bed that I have. I'm planting some carrots in one of my stock tanks because I'm also trying to experiment with which varieties do well in there, and let me show you what that looks like. So I have this 5 foot long kind of oval shaped stock tank, and it's 2 feet tall and 5 feet long and 2 feet wide, and I have it covered right now with an old window screen, so it doesn't look so pretty, but it functions well for keeping those pesky birds away. And what I've got in here, I have some peas that are going to grow up on this trellis, so those will not take up too much space. And then right next to the peas, I have this little adorable row of turnips. This is a new variety of turnip for me this year. And then in the next row, I've got carrots. So I have tried another Parisian style carrot in here, which is supposed to be very petite. And then in the front, I've got lettuce seedlings that are just coming up. So I've got 4 different rows of things in here that I'm combining, and I'll let you know how this works. But I am very confident that the carrots will work in here because this is a 2 foot deep bed, and those carrots are like this long. So I think they'll be just fine. You have 3 options for being able to sow carrot seeds. You can sow just plain raw carrot seeds. Those tend to be a little bit harder to handle. It's harder to get them spaced out properly without dropping too many or having them sown too thickly. So you may have to go back and thin them out later if you use raw seed, which is totally fine. You want to thin them out a couple weeks after they sprout to about 3 inches apart. That will give the carrots enough space to be able to spread out and not compete with each other for water or for nutrients. You can also use something called a pelleted seed, and these are seeds that you get that are covered in a coating of clay, and those are just much bigger and easier to handle. You can sow them further apart without having to struggle so much with it, and I've used those and had really good luck with them too. The third option you can use is a seed tape, and that is 2 very thin pieces of paper or paper product that they have sandwiched a carrot seed in between, and they have already done the spacing for you, so they're perfectly spaced out, and you simply roll out however much tape you want for that row, and then you bury it with about 1/4 inch of soil. So it couldn't get much easier than that. The benefit of the pelleted seed and the seed tape, of course, is that it's easier to plant. The drawback is that it is more expensive. So you should just decide what you want. If you don't mind thinning carrot seeds out later on, you could go with the raw seed. You'll probably get more options when it comes to variety for those as well. I usually will just use the raw seed because I want to be able to try all the different carrot varieties and not be limited by what I can get. But I want to share with you that I got a new toy just this year, and I used it for the first time this weekend, and that is a seeder. And it looks kind of like a little mini plow. It has a hopper that you can add the seed to. You can set the little shoe at the bottom, it looks like the little point of a plow, to the right seed depth. So for carrots, I set it to 1/4 of an inch. For other things, you might do a 1/2 or a whole inch, depending on what it is. And it has these little discs in it that have different size openings, and it has written right on that disc what variety it is. So whether it be okra or peas or lettuce or carrots or beets or what have you, there's a disc for pretty much everything. And you put whatever disc in for the variety that you're using, and that will distribute those seeds at the right spacing, which I think is so cool. And I planted this row of carrot seeds in like 1 minute. It was such a time saver. I don't think I'm ever going back. Unless of course I'm sowing a small bed like my small 4x4 beds, or maybe sowing carrots in a container or one of my raised beds. I'll still do that by hand, of course. Once you choose your carrot varieties, you're going to want to sow them 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep, and you want the rows to be about 12 to 18 inches apart. And a couple of weeks after the carrot seedlings emerge, you'll want to do your first thinning. So you want to thin them out, like I said, to every 3 inches. And then a couple of weeks later, which is about 4 weeks after you sowed the seeds, you might want to go through and do it again, just in case there are any late germinating seeds that have come up a little too close to the previous ones that germinated. Carrots like to have consistent moisture, and this is true when the seeds are germinating, and it's also true as the carrots are growing. So you want to make sure that you're very consistent on your watering and that you keep the soil moist. One of the ways that a lot of gardeners will keep that soil moist to make sure they get really good germination is to cover the row of carrot seeds that they've sown with something. So some people will use a long board, some people will use a piece of fabric or material. I've seen bed sheets used, I've seen burlap used. I don't have any burlap and I don't have any boards that are long enough, so I am experimenting this year with just using an old row cover that's a little too tattered to actually use as a row cover. So I'm just going to put it down over the soil in hopes that it will hold in that moisture and keep it really nice and consistently moist until those carrots germinate. It takes about 14 to 21 days for carrot seeds to germinate. I would start checking around 5 days or so. I would just peek underneath that board or piece of fabric just to see if you can spot any seedlings emerging. Once you start seeing seedlings emerge, they're going to need to have light, so you want to remove that cover. I will replace that covering with some hoops and a row cover that just hover on the top, and that's because, you got it, the birds will come and eat those seedlings because they do love some nice fresh sprouts. So I'll keep that row cover on until the carrots get fairly big, several inches tall, because then the birds are less likely to bother them. Once your carrots have germinated, you definitely want to stay on the consistent watering. So whether you're watering with an irrigation line or you're watering by hand, make sure that you're watering consistently enough that that soil stays moist. You don't want it soggy and muddy, but you definitely want it to be moist. Carrots are ready to harvest in 50 to 80 days, so it's a pretty quick turnaround. I think I can probably get 2 crops, maybe 3 if I'm super lucky, before it gets too hot to grow carrots in the late spring. Once you've harvested them, you want to wash them off really well, and then you want to let them air dry, because as you store them, you don't want to have all this moisture around the carrots because that can make them mold and rot. Then you want to trim all of the carrot tops off to about 1 inch tall so that they aren't rotting or sucking the moisture out or utilizing the sugar that's stored in the root. I like to store my carrots once they're cleaned and trimmed in Ziploc bags, and they will stay really well in the refrigerator for months. I still have some that I harvested maybe 6 months ago, and they are still nice and crisp in the Ziploc bags, and I use them all the time. Carrots come in so many different shapes and sizes and colors, and it's really fun to pick them out, I think. So have fun when you're choosing your variety of carrots. They have different characteristics, like how long you can store them, whether they're good for cooking or eating fresh or for juicing. They come in different shapes and sizes, and so they, I think, are so much fun to grow. And it is just like magic pulling a carrot out of the soil. I think that about a lot of different root vegetables. You never know what you're going to get, and when you pull it out of the soil, it could be really weird looking or it could be the most beautiful thing, and it's just like magic. There are quite a few small varieties of carrots, but the baby carrots that you buy in the bags in the grocery store are not actually baby carrots at all. After they're harvested, they're rolled through a metal cage to round the tips and to shave off the sides so that they become much smaller, but they are not baby carrots. That is just some marketing genius to make you think they're cuter. They are convenient to eat, so I still really like them, but they are not baby carrots or a small variety of carrot at all. There are 4 types of carrots, which I will go over. I'm going to put up a graphic for you, and if you would like, you can pause the video and you can take a picture of the screen so that that will help you select the carrot variety you want. There's also a bonus 5th type, and that is a Parisian market carrot, but those are just some of the really small petite carrots that are available. My espalier apple trees are doing so well. My husband helped me put up this little support system for them with turnbuckles and just wires, and they're connected to the bricks. So I planted these just about 2 years ago, and they are doing so good. And I've got 3 of them. I've got 2 Anna's variety, and I've got a golden Dorset. It wouldn't be a proper garden tour unless I showed you a few of the little pretty things that are happening in the garden right now. The pomegranate trees are getting so pretty. They have these little petioles on the leaf, the red little stem on them, and they've gotten to be so golden. There aren't very many indications of fall in the desert when it comes to the fall colors, but the pomegranates are stealing the show right now. Alright, so here's an overview of the 4 different types of carrots, plus the bonus varieties that I promised I would mention. Please forgive me with any mispronunciations. I will do my best, but I am not 100% sure on all of these. The Nantes variety, I've also heard it pronounced Nantes. You can look for the Scarlet Nantes variety or the Little Finger. They have a cylindrical shape with a very blunt tip, and the root is about 6 to 7 inches long. They're going to be crisp, tender, and sweet, great for home gardeners, and great for eating fresh. They are pretty forgiving and grow fairly easily in most soil types, so if you are just starting your garden or you have soil with a texture that's less than ideal, you might want to try this variety first. The next one is the Imperator. An example is the Tender Sweet. It is a long, tapered, and slender shape that's up to 10 inches long or more. It's crunchy and sweet and often used in commercial production. It does best in sandy, loose soils. You'll probably see this variety in the bags of carrots that you can purchase at the grocery store because they tend to have a uniform shape and a long shelf life. The next one is Danvers. An example is the Danvers 174. It has a tapered but shorter and thicker shape than the other carrots, and its root is about 6 to 8 inches long. It has a really nice, rich carrot flavor, which is great for cooking and juicing. It was developed in Massachusetts and known for its adaptability, and it does fairly well in heavy clay soils. And last but not least is the Chantenay. An example of the Chantenay is a red cord Chantenay or the Shin Kurodo, which I showed you before. It is a short conical shape with broad shoulders, and it's typically about 5 or 6 inches long. It's crisp and sweet, and it's ideal for cooking. So if you make that Italian food, you could use a Chantenay variety. I think the Chantenay variety is actually a pretty good choice for growing in southern Arizona because it does well in hard, rocky soils. It stores for a long time. It has a crisp, sweet flavor, and it's ideal for cooking. So if you remember, I said that I cook a lot of Italian food. If you're cooking a lot of Italian food that calls for carrots and celery and onion, you might want to try the Chantenay variety. It's great for storage and processing, and most importantly for Arizona gardeners, it's a little more heat tolerant than some of the other varieties. If you're looking for a small variety to grow in a container or in a raised bed, you could try some of the Parisian market varieties. There's also one called a Thumbelina, which is a very cute name. That's a good variety for small spaces. Those tend to be about 2 to 4 inches long, so they do really well in small spaces or containers, as I said. I am just now digging through all of the seeds that I have here in this little box. Over the weekend, since I sowed my first row of carrots, I still have the box out here. I need to take that in because I don't want the moisture to get to the seeds. But I wanted to show you some of the varieties that I'm trying this year. So I've got a few old seed packets, and most of them are similarly sized carrot varieties. So my plan is, in the next row that I sow in a couple of weeks, I'm going to just mix all of those seeds together and kind of have a little wacky, crazy carrot row. So it should be a surprise whenever I pull the carrots out of the soil, because I'm not going to know what I'm going to get. So these are all of my carrot varieties. I've got this red cord Chantenay, and I don't have a picture for this, but if I can find one online, I'll add it so that you can see it. Those are the ones that I planted this weekend. I got several packets of these from Seed Savers Exchange. And then I have all of these, and this is going to be my wacky blend. I've got a couple of old packets of calliope and some rainbow carrots, and you can see those are really pretty, but they're getting a little bit older. The packet says sell by 12/31/2020. I've also got some of these which are of similar size, so I'm going to be planting those. I've got a Kyoto red and a cosmic purple, and I've got this Uzbek golden. And then I got a ton of free seeds every time I ordered from Baker Creek. These, I have 3 packets of the coral. So I've never tried these. I assume that they are good for juicing because there is a cup of juice, carrot juice on the cover, which is great because I love carrot juice. And then I've got these 2, which are Shin Kuroda, and these are supposed to be great for reaching through dense soils. I don't worry too much about the sell-by date on seed packets. It's not like, you know, it's a food product and you have to just throw it in the trash if you don't get it planted by that date. So even though I am solidly 4 years out from the sell-by date on those calliope carrots, I am just going to try planting them and see what happens. You will have less germination as time goes on, so seeds do become less viable, but you will still get a lot of seeds that germinate. And I just say, if you have the time and you don't mind kind of experimenting with a germination rate, just try it and see what happens. There are certain kinds of seeds that really lose their viability much more quickly than others. So onion seeds come to mind. Those generally are only good for about 6 months, and so those definitely need to be used up fairly quickly. If I had a packet of old onion seeds, I might just put it into a container and sow them there just to see what happens. And if you get onion sprouts, you can then carefully dig those up when they get big enough, and you can use them as onion starts, just like the ones that you can order from places like Dixondale Farms. I order onion starts from them. But otherwise, I probably wouldn't put those in my main rotation. But with other things like carrots, those are going to last a little bit longer. Last year I planted a tomato variety that was 12 years old, and every single seed germinated. So that was well past the sell-by date on the packet, but I had really good results from those. And if you're starting your seeds in seedling trays in the house and you're using an old packet of seeds, I would say just, plant a few extra just in anticipation that maybe some of them won't germinate. But I think you're gonna be really surprised by how well most of the seeds will germinate. Look at all these beautiful calendula. I just love them so much. I'm always talking about them. And this one actually made it through the summer, which is amazing. That's why it looks so ragged. And set a few seeds, I think. These are some of the seeds that I saved last season when they were in full swing, and there are a lot of them. I actually caught myself looking at nasturtium seeds on one of the seed websites, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I thinking? I've got enough of these to start an entire farm. Yeah, I love seed saving. It's such a great deal, and you get things that are acclimatized to your yard, which is great. All right, for my fellow nerds, here is just a little bit of carrot history if you're interested. As I mentioned, botanists think that carrots originated in Afghanistan, but they were probably purple, not orange, and they were probably multi-branched instead of a single cylindrical root. Carrots remained branched while being cultivated by the Greeks and the Romans, but were probably selected for thicker and less bitter root. By the 10th and 11th century, carrots had made their way to Asia Minor, and they were more cylindrical and less branched, like the carrots that we think of today. By the 16th century, the carrot had made its way to Western Europe, but was a lighter yellow color and had lost its purple pigment, probably due to the selection of farmers and growers. The Dutch were heavily involved in carrot breeding during the late 16th and 17th century, and that is when many of the different varieties began to appear with a larger cylindrical root and that were orange in color like the carrots we know today. Their breeding programs further developed other carrot characteristics like storability and sweetness and size and shape. Carrot breeding has continued until today, and now there are over 500 carrot varieties in existence, and I doubt that I'll have time to try all of them in my lifetime, but I'm going to do my best. Now you all are prepared to have an epic carrot harvest this year, and also to dazzle your friends and family with all of your carrot knowledge, which I'm sure that they are going to be waiting on the edge of their seats for. I'm Kara from So, Arizona. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy gardening.